to Season 9, Episode 15 of Unlimited Opinions, the final episode of Season 9. We are, of course, reading Orestes Brownson's The American Republic, Its Constitution, Tendencies, and Destiny, covering Chapter 15, which is titled Destiny, Political and Religious. I am Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop, and you seem, gosh, is there an echo on your end?
No, I don't hear an echo.
I feel like I'm in a bathroom. Like echo. I can hear. It's very distracting.
Well, I think you're coming through fine on my end. That might just be you.
Okay. It's hard for me to speak.
This will be a good episode then.
There's a courtroom in Jefferson County Circuit Court. It's built like in a circle, and it has like a raised ceiling. It's an old 1960s era courtroom, and instead of like a rectangular shape with like the judge's bench up and like a standard thing, it's lit like the room is a circle, and so everything's angled, and then it has like a ceiling that has like a raised center, and so when as you're arguing a case, like especially in front of a jury, so the jury box is angled between 12 seats. Off to the left, and it just kind of circles around the court reporter and the judge's bench, and then back around behind you, or like the audience. But as you walk into the center, the echo reverberates back to you at a certain point. Like it's normal here, and then it echoes in the center.
Wow, that sounds awful.
And you really have to get used to it.
Yeah,
it'll kind of like throw off your train of thought every time, unless you prepared for it. So it's it's one of those struggles that lawyers have to get through.
Yes, the pains of the echo. This episode will be going up on November 5th, on Tuesday morning.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if we want to start off with any election predictions, because I know the many thousands of people that listen as soon as this comes out will be very curious to hear what we think about the election.
Well, why don't you start?
I think tentatively that Trump will win. I think he's leading in the right places. Things have looked positive the past few weeks. But I say tentative because I don't want to underestimate the ability for things to be weird, and for issues in counting and the weird ways that all the mail-in ballots have been done this year, and the problems with drop boxes and stuff like that. So I definitely don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for Harris to win on those accounts. But I think Trump has the votes needed to win officially.
I would tend to agree. I disagree with a little bit of what you're saying. Not that I don't think that there are shenanigans. Like if any lawyer who has practiced law with regard to election law knows, it's not. The question is not whether there will be ineligible voters that vote, or voters that will fraudulently vote or vote in multiple jurisdictions. That happens in every major election, in my opinion. Like, so you could be, you lived in Illinois, you moved to Missouri. They didn't, the Illinois didn't update your voter registration. You could, in theory, vote in Missouri and then drive 2 hours or whatever to Illinois and vote there too. And nobody's going to be the wiser unless, somebody really starts digging into it.
Yeah.
So, I think there's going to be stuff going on like that. And I think when you have a major political party candidate accusing the other candidate of being literally Hitler, well, I guess not really. They're not saying he is like the reincarnation of Hitler, so I guess it would still be figuratively Hitler, but Hitlerian.
Yes.
I think
that works.
So then, it justifies anything. And it goes back to the old, question. If you had a time machine and you can go back to killing Hitler at the beginning of World War II, would you do it? I've come around to that. I don't think it would make that big of a difference. I think there were problems in Germany. I don't think one guy did that.
Yeah.
I think he didn't act alone, so to speak. But in any event, so I would differ with that a little bit. And I think that the real concern is, they talk about the quiet Trump voters. I think there's an unknown number of pro-abortion extremist voters of both parties that are going to vote on that single issue, and it's unknown what that number is. Now, having said that, that number should have come out in 2020.
Yeah.
Because the Dobbs decision was before the 2020 election. And so when you're seeing the early voting returns, yes, right?
No, I don't think so.
Yes.
Dobbs was 22.
Was it?
Yeah, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, that was 22. Because I was there in D.C.
Right. That's right.
I was in
before the,
yeah.
I'm sorry, it was before the 22. Yes, correct.
Yes, I was in D.C. for like the 1 year anniversary, and that was 23, so it was in 22. Yeah.
They came. I'm sorry, those voters came out in 2022, and so there's like a known number of people that vote on that particular issue. I think so, and I don't think it was out of this world turnout, but it was unexpected. There was expected before that election, I think, that the Republicans would have done better than they actually did. And so I think
that's true.
So I think there's an accounting for that going forward. Anyway, but my prediction remains the same as what I shared with you a couple weeks ago, which in 2024, I think the most absurd and funniest result is what is going to happen. And that is that Trump will barely win the electoral vote. And the margin of victory will be Minnesota because the country will be united by one thing. We all hate Tim Walz. The Democrats, the more you know him, the more you dislike him.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how bad. I don't know who he ran against to be governor of Minnesota, but whoever his opponents were must be like they have to be mentally disabled or I don't know, convicted child molesters in order to lose to him.
Yeah, I mean, he's awful.
I don't know how he got to the level of power such as it is that he's had.
Yeah,
and I think his wild gesticulations are so weird, to use his term, describing. I mean, he really has something wrong with him, and that either people around him are not telling him quit waving your hands, palms out like a lunatic, or they have told him that and he can't stop.
Yeah.
And then when he raises his arms up, like to victory or celebrate or waving to the crowd, he like if he holds hands with Kamala Harris, he always kicks up one of his legs.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's really weird.
And it's not. He's not a dancer that I know of. And he's probably like a Manchurian candidate involved in China. That's just completely baseless statement. But other than he's had like 30 trips or whatever it was to China that was funded by, we still don't know who paid for all those trips. How does a school teacher go to China 15 times? Yeah. Well, I'm guessing probably the most favorable thing is that he got a whole bunch of students to pay for the trip and he got a free ticket. You know how they do that? Oh, I'm organizing the trip, and the package deal is you get 20 people to pay full freight and you get a free ticket. Yeah. So I think that's probably what happened. Anyway, so I think it would be so wonderful to have the Electoral College victory be the final tally would be that Minnesota carries the day, so that we could all agree that that he is horrible and that Kamala Harris's only really true decision as vice president, as a candidate, was selecting him, right? Because I think there's some truth to her defense of, the borders are a thing. She didn't really have any power. Yeah. That's the defense that Democrats are saying. And I think that's true to an extent. She could have asserted herself, but she has no constitutional authority as a vice president to do anything. And it all kind of happened under her watch, but the vice president, that's all they do is watch. Now she was a tie-breaking vote in a couple things, so she did have some power. But what else is she going to do? It's the president's proposal. Yeah.
But this is such a weird, election cycle too, because Joe Biden is clearly not the one in charge of the country at this point, and so I think that's where a lot of people are like, well, maybe she is the one who has been running the show, or has more say than vice presidents have had in the past.
Do you think anybody really thinks that?
I think people are worried about it. I mean, I think it's very easy for people to look back at the last 3 years and say things aren't going well. And she's at least been nominally in some sort of position in charge, and to not like her because of that. I don't know if a lot of people really think that she's the one running the country, but it's easy to pick her out as someone who's to blame. And I think on the Tim Walz thing, I think a lot of people are underestimating just how unlikable Kamala is, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of like political pundits out there, and all the pollsters are like, well, people approve of this issue over this issue and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot of people in the country who don't pay as much attention to the issues as people think, especially as a lot of the pundits think, and they just like, I don't want to vote for that crazy woman. But I think the same can be said for Trump. But I don't think Kamala's really motivating new people to come out and vote unless it's specifically like on abortion or on stuff like that. I mean, I don't think a lot of she's definitely lost ground along the like young left wing crazy people, because she's like a pro-Israel person to some degree, and she's
pretending that,
yeah. And so it's like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of spoiler issues for her there, where it's like, I don't know if that'll motivate people to vote for Trump, but I don't think it will motivate people to vote for her.
Yeah. And I think there's something to how, and I think it's a female phenomenon, that there's a certain segment of women that find her repellent and repugnant. Like her voice.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of men who think that too, though. I think that's just because she might be repugnant.
Well, I mean, I think her tone in her voice is like fingernails on chalkboard for me and almost everyone. But I think there's a particular dislike of her from a lot of women because she's so fake, and they pick up on that. And in my experience in the law, in litigation, women are the most judgmental against other women. Negatively. They talk about girl power, and there's going to be some of that, but there's a lot of if she has a very harsh tone in her voice, and I think that's just I just think she was born with that voice. I'm not saying it's a personal insult, but I just think that she's unfortunately a hard person to even listen to.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think all the trends that are known are favoring the Republicans. The big question is, the early vote is going much better for Republicans than it did 4 years ago. But what does that mean? Does that mean that those people would have voted on Election Day and now they're not? You're cannibalizing all your frequent voters. But I suspect it's not. I mean, it's. I think it's still going to be a big Election Day turnout.
Yeah.
And I don't think the Democrats are going to have the built-in margin. And there is something to be said for the activity of Republican lawyers, at least making it known that they are watching. And I think that has a huge deterrent effect. It's just like a beat cop, walking down the street. People are not going to generally commit a crime when a uniformed officer is seen in the area.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a certain amount of that, and I think meaningful reforms, especially in Georgia, famously the Major League Baseball, in protest of the Georgia statute firming up voter ID and that kind of stuff, they canceled the World Series in Atlanta following the 2020 election, when the legislature cleaned up some of the issues they had. So I think you're seeing in the polling that in Georgia, I think Trump's going to win that. I think Georgia's going to. He's going to win Nevada and Arizona, and so then you get to the swing states, the so-called blue wall, and Harris could still win all three of those, but if she loses Minnesota, she's toast.
That's true.
Without the Sunbelt states, and I think I will make this prediction. I think we're going to have the early indicator for how this election is going to go is going to be New Hampshire. If New Hampshire is close, and the reason why I think you're going to see something from that first is it's obviously an East Coast state, and many of the East Coast states are not going to be they're not going to be close.
Yeah.
But if New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is a small state, and they tend to have the returns come in fairly efficiently. So if Trump wins that, and there's some suggestion that he's getting close, if he wins that, or if it's very close or too close to call, like at 9:30,
Yeah.
Our time, Central Time, so it'd be 10:30 their time. I think that's going to be sending a message that, okay, this turnout model is coming up for Trump, and you're going to see Virginia being close, and I don't know if he's going to win it, but if he gets blown out in New Hampshire, then I think the polling has been wrong. Probably about all the states.
Yeah,
because they're saying it's tightening up in New Hampshire. If they're wrong with that, they're probably going to be wrong about everything else.
Yeah. Well, we should probably turn to the book at some point here, but those are good predictions. So we're both in agreement. Trump will, tentatively, we think Trump will win.
I will say that is my prediction that he will win. I don't think you can say tentatively. It's kind of chicken.
Well, I'm not 100% confident that he'll win. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I think it'll be close.
If you're going to have a bet, so you got to bet. You have to pick. What's your pick?
I would bet not a lot of money, but I would bet on Trump.
Like a very close electoral college vote? Okay.
I would say so.
I would say he's going to win. My expectation is going to be very close electoral college win, and I really do think he will win Minnesota, and that will be the difference. That is really my prediction.
That'll be crazy if it does happen.
But I also think that he will win the popular vote.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
He's going to run up such a huge margin in the state of Florida that he will offset the margins in California and New York and all these other states. And Republicans across the United States, no matter if they're in Missouri or any other state where it's clearly he's going to win or clearly he's going to lose, they're going to come out and they're going to vote because he took a bullet. And there have been huge lines in our county, which everybody knows. He carried our county like 2-1.
Yeah.
So it's not like we have to get out and vote for him, but the early voting has been huge. There's been huge lines at the county administration building. We voted early. It's the first time I ever voted early.
Yeah.
We did it that Friday. It's kind of nice because that way I know, well, if I get busy at work or whatever, I don't have to force it in the day, and it's in the box.
Yeah, it's true.
So I do think he's going to win the popular vote, which will then be a very interesting discussion if he loses the electoral college but wins the popular vote. I wonder what I don't know. I don't wonder what the Democrats will say. We know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
They're going to turn on a dime.
Yeah, of course. But let's actually turn to the chapter here, because I thought this was a really great end of this book, and I thought you would like it too, because essentially his two main points here are that Catholicism is vital to the existence of America, and America needs to expand and include both the North and South Americas within the United States. That's kind of his ending message here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he's talking at this point in American history. This is after the Mexican-American War, so we've already appropriated an entire swath of land from the Louisiana Purchase all the way to California, to and through California, from any claims of Mexico all the way up to the Canadian border. And he's already talking about, we're gonna incorporate several states out of Mexico. He says that in here when the parties agree, and we're not going to do it by force, but an understanding and annex those into our country. And I the more I'm thinking about this is something I've been developing over the various seasons of this podcast. And I'm becoming more and more in favor of southern expansion of the United States. And I don't see there's any logical reason why we wouldn't expand through Central and Southern South America.
No.
It makes a lot of economic sense. I think it would benefit everybody. I'm not necessarily talking about military conquest, but clearly everybody south of our border wants to be an American. Right.
That's true.
10 million people, mostly from residents of Mexico and Guatemala and Central and South America, have come across on foot
Yeah.
in the last 4 years to become Americans, so to speak. So why don't we all just agree? Okay, let's make you all Americans.
Yeah.
Or first step would be American subjects, and then we go from there. I mean,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
they all want to be here anyway.
Yeah.
Why don't we just bring America to them?
And that's his argument in here, more or less, that we need to bring America further out. Because what he says and how he starts the chapter is essentially saying that the special mission of the United States is to continue and complete in the political order the Greco-Roman civilization. Right? He sees America as very much sort of the fulfillment of Rome. He says, in the Greco-Roman civilization is found the state proper and the great principle of the territorial constitution of power instead of the personal or the genealogical, the patriarchal or the monarchical, and yet with true civil or political principles mixed up nearly all the elements of the barbaric constitution. So he's essentially saying, like, as we talked about, in earlier chapters, just how good Rome was in introducing this territorial idea, rather than having, all of your rights determined, whose family you're in, what sort of line you're from. He says, but in the beginning, they had that sort of system, and you had these different tribes of peoples and stuff like that. But over time, they developed this system that was based on the land of Rome, what he calls sort of the Greco-Roman civilization. And through that, you could expand throughout all of the Mediterranean and incorporate people in and make them, equal citizens, after a certain period of time and after, fully incorporating this land. But it was because the land was so important to the idea of the nation.
Yes, and he's using pretty strong language when he mentions Mexico, Central America, Colombia, and Brazil, and the rest of South America states might be absorbed in the United States without being missed by the civilized world. I think that might be overstating it a little bit. But when you talk about and I'm not an expert on Mexican political philosophy or governance, but it's certainly close to a narco state. With lawless areas and lack of local control, at least over certain regions and areas. Mm-hmm. Certainly no control over their northern border. What would be the loss to the American people if that governing structure was changed to not a commonwealth, but maybe a protectorate? They don't want to use the word colony, but some sort of superstructure put on those areas that would be hopefully less corrupt, and adopt the rule of law and have a certain amount of effective safety, personal safety for the people, and then you could expand that south. And I mean, which one of these countries really are effectively governed by, in a Republican fashion, and in a way that would be that is better or more efficient than if they were another state of the United States eventually.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of don't know the answer to that, but I think those people may benefit from all the residents there, the citizens of those countries may benefit from that type of expansion. I wouldn't say that they wouldn't be missed, but I don't know of any. For some of it may be ignorance. I don't know of any really unique governmental structures, or great philosophical thought that are really coming from, Central and South American political leaders that is better than the republic that we have. Yeah, I know a little bit about Argentina and the history there. I know a little bit about Mexico and some of the other ones, but. Anyway, I think he says it bluntly for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an interesting thing to see in writing because you don't see that anywhere.
Yeah.
And I know what I'm saying will be terribly controversial among some people, but again, if everybody wants to be an American, well, let's just make them Americans.
It's interesting that he's saying that this at this time. I mean, this was the time of United States expansion, but the U.S. wasn't like a major world superpower at this time, and it's interesting to see like how he says, if the United States were to be gone, you can't say that nothing would be missed. No, we are important. We are sort of this fulfillment of this grand historical mission, and it's kind of our specific duty to expand and to carry on that mission, which is interesting. How much importance he sees in the United States.
Well, I think this attitude was changed by the Civil War.
Yeah,
there were a lot of the European observers that observed the military growth of both the North and the South, and the tremendous industrialization of war making that was accomplished by Americans and killing other Americans. They realized that we were going to be a superpower. I mean, that smart people knew the number of men we were able to put under arms, the manufacturing base, and the dexterity of creating new weapons, repeating fire weapons, armored ships. We invented that pretty much. I mean, there might have been some other, maybe France or Italy might have had something that had some sort of light armor on it, but that started to perfect that. The armored ships in our Civil War, going up and down the Mississippi, the coast, with a number of different modifications and changes, and a lot of loss of life and boiler explosions and other things, mishaps that happened in battle or not in battle that they corrected for, different tactics that were. Anyway, so that was, and then of course there was always the Monroe Doctrine, which was maybe a little bit of hubris on the part of America, saying to the European powers, stay out of this hemisphere. So that was already in existence for a while. And I mentioned the Monroe Doctrine briefly in this chapter, but it was, they didn't respect America as an equal at that point. But I think the smart observer saw, holy moly, they are killing people at a rate that far exceeds anything that we were able to do or are able to do against each other or against them.
Yeah.
And it was known at that point there was not going to be another War of 1812.
Yeah.
If an army came to come after us, I mean, we lost 600,000 men in that war. And if anybody attacked the United States in a ground war, they would be annihilated. There was no other power. At that point, at the end of the Civil War, there were more men, effective military men, in the United States than anywhere else in the world.
Interesting. Yes. Yeah, no, those are good points. But then he moves on, no, that's all right. Still talking about Rome. He says, one of the big flaws of Rome, however, he talks about, how it had so many good things. But he gives a very good refutation of slavery here. I know we were kind of talking in earlier chapters, like he almost seemed a little hesitant on that front and things like that. But he says, one of the things that was really wrong with Rome is that they thought that the emperor had the power, essentially to enslave people. And he says, but there is no power in heaven or earth that can make a person a thing, a mere piece of merchandise, and is only by a clumsy fiction, or rather by a barefaced lie, that the law denies the slave his personality and treats him as a thing. If the unity of the race and the brotherhood of all men had been clearly seen and vividly felt, the law would never have attempted to justify perpetual slavery on the ground of its penal character, or indeed on any ground whatever. All men are born under the law of nature with equal rights, and the civil law can justly deprive no man of his liberty, but for a crime committed by him personally that justly forfeits his liberty to society. So he's saying, we can't just keep everything the same way that the Romans did it. We have to fix that big issue here. We cannot have slavery exist, or it will be the death of the United States and the death of all of these civilizations if we allow this horrible, horrible practice to exist.
Yeah, and he has actually been pretty consistent against slavery throughout the book.
It's true.
It was the suffrage issue, but it was. I agree. I was like, oh, good. He highlights that because you start wondering.
Yeah.
I mean, he did mention one thing. 191. He says he was talking about the emperor under Roman law would not have the ability to kill. It has the ability to kill on the battlefield those in arms against him, but then once they've ceased resisting. And surrendered, under Roman law, they would have no right to keep killing. And I was wondering if he knew of the existence of the destruction of Carthage.
Yeah,
because they slaughtered
Yeah.
all of men, women, and children. And now, granted, there was some resistance going on, but during part of that slaughter. But boy, they made an example
Yeah, no
of
kidding.
Carthage to say it. But anyway, but I think generally he's right that they that was generally frowned upon, and they kind of made excuses for it, and said, "Oh yeah, we regret the excesses of some of our men. They got carried away." But it was like a direct, yeah, go ahead, cut loose, and that shouldn't have happened. But they're kind of happy it did.
Yeah. Yeah, but then he brings up Christianity into this whole equation here, and that's what he talks about for a good portion of this chapter, because he says really that for the most part,
about Catholicism. He uses the lowercase Catholic. Is he talking about Catholicism, or is he just talking about like a general agreed Christian faith? Or what do you think he's referring to there?
I think both at the same time, because there are instances where he does use capital C Catholicism, but I mean, Catholic, just as a word means universal, right? And so I don't think you can have a universal Christianity that is splintered among many different groups, if you see what I mean. So I don't think he, as this Catholic convert, clearly very ardent in his faith, would ever say like, yeah, we can have a Christianity and it's okay that nobody really agrees on what that Christianity is, as long as it's a vague Christianity. I think he really means Catholic, capital C Catholic, universal, actual Catholic Church here. I don't think there's any other way that he could imagine that.
Because when he talks about the actual Catholic Church, as far as actions of the church, they use the capital C Catholic. But then he's describing Christian or Catholic faith. He uses the little c. So I was a little confused by, okay, what is he really talking about there?
Yeah.
Anyway. So, but yeah, he basically says that, there's divine providence and there's a Catholic ideal that will prevail. And because, as I understand it, his theory is, well, the structure of the United States of America is such that it doesn't put a thumb on the scale with regard to the Christian or Catholic thought, and that allows Catholicism to really be their preeminent authority.
Yeah,
and the divine guidance and divine providence in that spiritual side of the development of the United States, and he calls basically all the other Christian religions sects that will fail. And it seems like he thinks they're going to fail like in the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah. Of course, they didn't. In fact, a lot of the different Protestant religions expanded tremendously. I don't know what the rates were, after the 1860s, but certainly huge numbers.
Yeah. Well, that's a prediction that Tocqueville made too, in Democracy of America. I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast before. Maybe. I feel like I've brought this up, but maybe not. But he makes the prediction that, like, if American conservatism will succeed at all, it has to be Catholic, because it has to have an agreed upon system, something that's universal in that way. But
you did mention that.
Yeah. Yes. But Brownson here, literally compares the government to the Trinity, because he's kind of comparing and contrasting, like, well, France nominally says that the emperor reigns by the grace of God and the will of the nation, but there's really no restraint on his power, right? It's just kind of him acting as France, and he is sort of the embodiment of France, and that's not the way to do it. But he says the human race has its life in God and tends to realize in all orders the divine word or logos, which is logic itself, and the principle of all conciliation, of the dialectic union of all opposites or extremes. So he essentially says, like, through the Trinity, he says the Son or Word is the medium which unites the two extremes, whence God is living God, a real active living being, and the Holy Trinity is the principle and prototype of all society, and what is called the solidarity of the race is only the outward expression or copying the external order of what theologians term the circumcision of the three divine persons of the Godhood. So lots of words there. To what he's really saying is, like, if we want a society to succeed, we have to model the society after the Trinity, because all human society has a desire to copy that sort of relationship. And so in the United States, we have this system where we can have sort of the extremes, but they are sort of brought together through a common medium, right? In the same way that he sees that the Word is the medium which unites the two extremes of the Father and the Holy Spirit. It's an interesting theological opinion, but it's I think it's interesting that he brings it up in this closing section here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I think his analysis of the merits of the Constitution are accurate, meaning that the structure moderates the extremes and diffuses power while also being effective. But I don't know that it really is modeled after the Trinity. In any meaningful way, other than kind of coincidentally. Mm-hmm. But I was like, oh, okay. You really think the Catholic thing is going on here?
Yeah.
But he does mention some interesting things about like the European states, if they were going to try to join up, that they would essentially be kind of segueing into the next section, which is about the different systems, and the different European states. If they were to be in a union, it would only be a confederacy because they are separate peoples. I think he's right about that.
And he predicted the European Union. I think it's almost exactly what he's describing.
And he predicted that some or one among them will aspire to hegemony among them, which is really Germany. Like the big controversies, especially the financial crises of a few years ago, where Germany was forcing austerity changes to Greece, Italy, and some of those Mediterranean states, but they had the financial wherewithal to really dominate that entire union, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, I thought that was pretty good. He has a lot of discussions about the history and structure of Rome and Roman thought.
Yeah, we kind of talked about that in earlier chapters. I mean, I found his discussion interesting. I think he gets just about everything right there, but probably not something that we need to go into in this episode here. But he does say, one of the big differences in America from Rome, this is on 196, he says, there was indeed a nearer approach to the division of powers in the American system between imperial Rome and her allied or confederated municipalities. And so kind of bringing up again that sort of separation of powers, not where you have everything kind of opposed to one another, but you're all kind of working towards, one common goal, right? It's not a bunch of enemies, kind of held at bay through this contract that we hold, but it is actually sort of one system that everybody wants to be a part of. And that's where he brings up, the kind of expansion here too, in a way, where he says the political destiny or mission of the United States is in common with the European nations to eliminate the barbaric elements retained by the Roman Constitution, and then specifically to sort of, broaden out this goal throughout all of the Americas, is to bring this idea to its fulfillment.
Yeah, and he continues on in the next couple lines there where he says, the checks and balances which organize the antagonisms which seek to preserve liberty by obstructing the exercise of power. So pretty consistent view there about the checks and balances being able to slow things down and preserve liberty. But he continues at 197 where he says, but the United States have, and he uses the plural, have a religious as well as political destiny, for religion and politics go together. Then he's really getting into this Catholic and Christian thought. And I don't know what I think about that, but he says the political destiny of the United States is to conform the state to the order of reality, or so to speak, the divine idea of creation. Yeah. He's a lot more optimistic about the spirituality of our federal government, I guess. I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to say that we're on God's side, I guess. Maybe I'm just getting cynical, but
I mean, I think he's 100% right in this section. I don't know if we're actively achieving that goal, but I think he's right in his analysis that essentially that the church and the state have the same goal in mind, which is the common good of the people. Their end destinations are kind of two separate paths, right? The church is geared towards the eternal, but the state is geared towards, the political, what's happening right here. But ultimately, they should be aligned in what they want to do. That doesn't mean they combine into one system. They kind of have their separate spheres, but they should never really contradict in a properly functioning society. And I think that's really the order, the point he's making here, because he's saying, going back to his discussions earlier with people being sort of the second causes of God and God working through providence, what is that if not, working through the state? And so, if the people are sort of the method that God uses to work through history, then absolutely the state should be sort of aligned with the church and all of its goals.
Yeah. he specifically mentions that the Catholic faith is the one that has to be the guiding force, because, and he has a really good defense of Catholic thought on 198, where essentially it's like the tradition and the teachings of the Catholic Church are fixed, essentially. The dogmas of the faith, that they're founded, so many years at the beginning of the church, and you have to accept those and conform to them, or you're not on the right path. And so, I mean, he is obviously saying a lot better than I am now, but that's I think always one of the strongest arguments in favor of the Catholic religion as opposed to one of the Protestant religions.
Yeah, because that's what he says. I really like what he says. He says religion is not a theory, a subjective view and opinion, but is objectively at once a principle, a law, and a fact. And subjectively, it is, by the aid of God's grace, practical conformity to what is universally true and real. Right, and that's something that people have completely lost now. Is that understanding of religion? Like, people view religion as something you do in your free time. It's what you do on Sunday morning, and kind of keep it to yourself. But of course, that's not what religion is.
Right. Yeah, and I one of the things I really enjoy about the Joe Rogan podcast, which I mentioned several times during this our various pod seasons, but one of the things I really like about him is he is almost anti-religion. Anyway, why do you like that? Well, because he kind of throws that perspective into. He had an interview with J.D. Vance, and I haven't gotten through it all because it's like, I don't know, a couple hours long,
3.5 hours long or something. Talked forever.
Car, on the way to work or whatever. But they got to the abortion issue, and of course Rogan, he's not pro-abortion, but he has issues with, he mentions almost as a cast aside statement about, well, the abortion restrictions are really religious restrictions on people's freedom or whatever the case may be. And I'm like, and of course it was in the context of almost a kind of a different discussion. I would have preferred some sort of response about, well, that's our entire criminal justice system. Well, not so much anymore, but generally the criminal justice system is set up on a system of morality, whether it's religious or otherwise. I mean, why is stealing illegal? Because it's morally wrong. Whether you just find that from the Bible or some other sacred text, or just you reason it out. But of course, now I've gone on these rants before about, well, there's those crimes, but there's the process crimes. Yeah. And the process crimes are swallowing it, so that everything can be criminalized, including, evidently, having a pet squirrel. Do you hear about that?
Yeah, I saw that. It's crazy.
The state of New York comes in and raids that guy's house with a search warrant. What is it, Nut the squirrel or Nutty the squirrel?
Peanut the squirrel. Yeah.
And this guy is like some sort of rescue guy. He's also, I think, maybe I read somewhere that he's like also an OnlyFans dude.
Oh, interesting.
So I think he might have been using Peanut the squirrel to like feed people to that.
Well, I know he's like a YouTuber. I don't know about that end of things, because that's how he made all the money.
Maybe defaming. I apologize if I'm wrong about that, but I read something along those lines. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah. He also rescued a raccoon.
Yes.
The state of New York comes in there and seizes them, and to determine if they are in fact rabid, which there's no indication they were.
Yeah, because he's had the squirrel for like 7 years or soming. Like, it's like a pet squirrel that he's had for years.
Was it that long?
I think so.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible. And they're now the online mob is going after some lady they claim has complained and caused this whole thing.
Yeah.
And who knows if that's true either, but the mob is going to do what the mob is going to do. It's why we want democracy in its unregulated form. But again, that was a regulatory criminal investigation. There's nothing morally wrong. I don't think anybody would say it's morally wrong to rescue a squirrel and have it run around your house and you feed it little nuts or whatever. Yeah. There's nothing. I don't think. Maybe there might be something about impure animals or something in some religions. I mean, I guess maybe there is. But even then, I think it's more of a regulatory thing within the religion as opposed to an evil thing. And so how would we criminalize having a pet squirrel.
Yeah.
We've gotten completely out of control with our
Yeah.
regulatory environment, and that's a great example of it.
Yeah.
Not
I
a
was just
raccoon, maybe. I don't know. Although they're very cute.
Yeah, I was just amazed. Like, I guess it was through like the health department or like the animal, whatever department they have out there in New York. I'm surprised they have like ground, people to go in and raid people's houses. Like, why do they have the power to do that? That's kind of wild.
Oh, we have that locally.
Yeah.
So, but we deal with it at the local level with vicious dogs.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
So and there's a provision in Missouri state law that requires that a dog be euthanized if it's found to be a vicious animal who's attacked a human.
Yeah.
And I had a recent case where there was a pack of 5 dogs that
that's right.
attacked an old lady and nearly killed her. So anyway, so there's and the only way to process that is, and we were the dogs were eventually surrendered. None of them were euthanized. We reached an agreement of sorts with the owner to move out of the county. With the stipulation they never enter the county again. And then we warned the neighboring county. The judge says, wait a second, I don't think I just want to sign off on an agreement where you just ship this problem to another community. And she ordered me to warn the local communities, the rural areas, so the risk is minute.
That's funny.
There's a separation between these property owners. They can't just go across the street again.
Yeah.
But anyway, but yeah, we would have done a search warrant to enter their property to seize the animals, to test them for rabies because there was an attack, if they didn't surrender them temporarily for that observation and vaccination process.
Yeah.
So that part of it, the procedures are always there. Mm-hmm. But for a pet squirrel, am I ever going to issue a search warrant to seize a pet squirrel? Never. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I guess I wouldn't say never. If that squirrel had attacked a neighboring child and bitten the kid's face off, yes. Okay.
Yeah. I feel like there's a few steps you could have gone through first, like knocked on his door and said, hey, do you have a pet squirrel here? Or looked at his public YouTube channel and saw that he had a pet squirrel and just contacted the guy instead of raiding his house and euthanizing his squirrel.
Yeah, I suspect that they may have already contacted him and he said that he has to surrender the squirrel. I'm guessing.
Maybe.
And he told him to pound sand. Get a peanut. And they probably never envisioned that they would go to these lengths. And so he just thought, well, maybe they'll file a lawsuit and then I'll be in court with a citation that I could fight off with a lawyer.
Yeah. Instead, they came in and killed his squirrel.
Yeah. It's something else.
Crazy.
But it's not unheard of.
Yeah, yes, it's true.
For heavy-handed government functionaries to just be really stupid. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. But back to the book.
But it has to do with the banality of evil.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the regulatory criminal regulations are not like this author suggests they should be, which is based upon a moral principles. He's saying that the government should be set up consistently with moral teaching and Christians specifically thought, and we have gotten away from that.
Yeah.
Those types of Judeo-Christian criminal justice principles to a large extent, because we've expanded it to all these other things that we just say, well, you can't do that, and so it's wrong.
Yeah, and I like what he says, going back to the religion discussion. He says, all real religion is Catholic and is neither new nor old, but is always and everywhere true. He says, even Jesus, came, he didn't found a new religion. He just came and revealed what has always been true. It is Catholic. It is universal. It has to be, or else it's not real. It's not the truth. It has to be something eternal. And he says, but while the church, and her dogmas are founded in the divine order and are Catholic and unalterable, the relations between the civil and ecclesiastical authorities may be changed changed and modified by the changes of time and place. And this is really, we get into the relations of church and state.
Right.
And he says, in all the essentially the horrible governments of the old world, the national church is held in strict subjection to the civil authority. And I really like what he says about France. He says, in France, this is on page 199, in France, which has the proud title of eldest daughter of the church, Catholics as such are not freer than they are in Turkey. All religions are said to be free, and all are free, except the religion of the majority of Frenchmen. And I think that's really funny. And I think he absolutely kind of predicts, what happens in a lot of other countries, nowadays, where it's, the Christians are usually the ones who are seen as sort of the enemy of the people. Any other religions are more than welcome, but the Christians are a real problem that we have in any given Western country.
Well, them and the Jews.
Yeah, that's true.
Everybody seems to hate the Jews. I still don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. That's a weird thing too. But yeah, he does foresee. Because at that time, the French Revolution, of course, was notoriously hostile to Catholics and a lot of nuns. And this is, of course, following that, but many years later, and they're still not very friendly towards the Catholic Church, even modern times.
Yeah.
I think Cathedral Notre Dame, I think it's owned by the government. I think
all the churches are. I think all the churches are on public land, like government-owned land. Yeah,
because they seized it and they never gave it back to the Catholics.
Yeah, it's true. And that's why he says, only in the United States the church is not treated as an enemy. That's why it's unique, and that's why we're able to have Catholicism to flourish. And he kind of wants to make himself clear. He's like, I'm not arguing for like a mixture of church and state like back in the Middle Ages. That's not desirable or possible. But we also can't have a complete separation of church and state. He says that's condemned by the Pope in 1864. He says that is not a thing that is really possible to happen, and Catholics should not advocate for that because we need these two institutions to sort of be pointing at the same source. If they're entirely separated and it's kind of just, let politics do whatever it wants, not have any impact from the church, then that's just not a good position to have at all.
Yeah, and he goes on to talk about like how much the church is involved, or how the church is involved is going to depend on the circumstances. He says in 201, the church cannot treat men as free men where they're not free men, nor appeal to reason in those whom reason is undeveloped. Mm-hmm. So and I think it sounds really paternalistic or condescending, but there's a certain amount of truth to that. If you have an illiterate population, you could talk about all these wonderful theoretical principles of religious philosophy and dogma, but you have to be somewhat practical about how you're establishing the moral principles and guiding the church and the state, and you got to deal with the people as they are and adapt and grow with them, especially with the structures. His whole philosophy seems to be, you can't like a cookie cutter, you can't force this system upon people that are not ready for it.
Yeah.
And he's consistent with that throughout.
Yeah, because that's what he says. He says she, referring to the church, she herself remains always the same in her constitution, her authority, and her faith, but varies her discipline with the variations of time and place. Right? You're always, geared towards a universal truth, an eternal truth, but you might have to take different methods to get people to get to that truth. And I like that point there. But then,
a lot of, I don't know what else you want to say. A lot of what he says from there on to the end are just a lot of, there's a lot of good stuff, but I don't know if it's anything different than what we've already talked about. But he does mention, the power of the church and the state, comes immedially from God, and without intervention or mediation of the state, the church has that power. And so he has an excellent discussion of it, but I don't know what else we need to go through. I'm saying that as a question, not as a statement.
Yeah, I don't know how much else we can really describe here without just telling people to read the whole thing, because he has such great points, and he advocates for this so well, because I mean, essentially his main argument is you don't need to force Catholicism into the Constitution of the United States. He says these Catholic principles are there and have always been there, and eventually they will be realized sort of by the natural working out. So long as the United States does not become antagonistic to the church, and so long as we don't become a nation full of idiots, because that's kind of what he says in there. He says, the American people are intelligent and hardworking and free thinking, and that leads them to the Catholic Church. That leads them to the Catholic real religion. And so there must be, eventually all these other false religions. That's what he explicitly calls sort of the other denominations of Christianity, because those were the other religions in America at the time. The false religions will sort of fade away over time, and eventually the American people will sort of realize their potential and make this Catholic state.
Yeah, and I think he overstates the case for those other sects falling apart, as I mentioned earlier. But I think in modern times, I think we're getting to that point. A lot of these religions, organized religions, are really struggling. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Catholic Church, of course, has struggled with declining, attendance and all that kind of stuff. But I think the other churches are even worse. Yeah. With as far as an organized religion, there's a lot of these big, I call non-denominational chures that are really growing, but they're like one-offs or they're regional, and they always seem to end up with struggles with regard to dogma. Yeah, because it's like they have to create them all from scratch again. And I know they're, a lot of like if they're Baptists, they're part of the Southern Baptist Convention, but they have huge disputes at their convention about pretty important issues, which is really interesting to read about when I do read about them. Give Catholic Church councils, arguing about different practices and procedures and that kind of stuff, and it's kind of funny because some of them historically have been somewhat anti-Catholic, that criticism of, well, you're doing that because it's a procedure as opposed to what's in the Bible, and then you have arguments about ordaining female ministers, which I think was, if I remember correctly, what was being argued about at the last Baptist convention. Yeah, because some of these these local churches are starting to do that. Yeah. And it's caused a big problem with those. Yeah,
and I think that's one of the big reasons why you have so many people turning to the Catholic Church. As he says in here, with Catholic literally meaning universal. It's always been true. It will always be true. They've held these things forever, and I think that's really appealing, especially young people now. We're kind of going through the modern stupid education system we have, and kind of with the whole rhetoric of everything's relative. Don't really believe anything fully. Everything's nothing is really truth, and so that's why so many young people are coming to the Catholic Church as opposed to other religions. And that's what I've seen. We just had today at Mass this morning. I'm a confirmation sponsor for someone entering into the church. And so we had the rite of acceptance and welcoming, which is like the first step where you just say, yeah, we approve of these people. They can continue on through RCIA. And there were, 50 people being in this, right? 40, 50 probably. Like there was barely enough room for us up at the front of church to kind of line up with everybody up there, which is fantastic. And it's all young people, young adults, grad students, some college students, but yeah, lots of young people. And I'm seeing, kind of on the political side of things too, that there are an increasing amount of Catholics in these sort of, especially sort of the intellectual, political, circles that I've seen and stuff like that. Like that Intercollegiate Studies Institute conference that I went to back in August, I was like 75% Catholics, and these are all people who are very interested in politics and very interested in getting involved and either writing about politics or actively working in politics. And so I think just the numbers of people becoming Catholic, and then the numbers of those Catholics interested in politics and actually moving into government, I think will change things very quickly within the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah, there was an article, I don't know if I shared it with you, in that magazine that I like to read, at First Things, a couple months ago, about the increase in, what are they called, student evangelizing or student, whatever it is, the Newman houses at all that college.
Yeah, the Newman Center, yeah.
But it's, what's the term for it? But they were saying how in recent years, and they interviewed a number of, local people at universities that are, either priests or people that are running these outreach efforts, and they were talking about the same things you're talking about, which is that they've had huge in the last few years, really expressing interest, and a lot of it's a reaction to the insanity of the left and the non-denominations. Like, so you have like a Christian student union or a Baptist student union, but there's criticisms of those being, well, they don't really stand for anything because they don't want to offend any of the different Protestant religions on one particular thing or other. But the Catholic Church is like, nope, pro-life, nope, no gay marriage, no this or that, or yes, this and this and this. And that's just the way it is. And that's, we're not gonna treat you, we're not gonna delve into your, feed into your delusions of whatever the case may be in the current fad. And this wasn't a scientific study of it, but it was seemed like a pretty thorough examination of a lot of different campuses that we're seeing a huge uptick just as you're describing. Yeah, because there's just some. It's a thing that resonates with people in times of uncertainty. If there's something that's consistent and true, it'll have power.
Yeah, and that's something I've heard because I've talked to a lot of people who have already converted and stuff like that. Like, that's a good portion of the people who are like involved at the Newman Center stuff are people who are converts and weren't raised Catholic, and that's something that you hear a lot is like, well, when I was just talking to Catholics, they have an answer for things, or they know where to find an answer, and it's not just like, well, on this issue, just follow your heart, do what Jesus is calling you to do, and it's like, no, sometimes this is the truth, and we can point to 5 different people throughout 2,000 years who have written book-length, treatises on this, beginning in like the year 100. And so it's like, you have this huge tradition. It's like, it's just hard to compare to that, if you're coming from a different religion or a different, denomination where it's a lot more fluid in that way. Because it's like, well, we kind of have to, step these boundaries. You don't want to have a firm stance on this because it might, draw some people away and, might not bring everybody sort of into cohesion here. But it's like, no, the Catholic's like, no, here's the answer. And here are all of these, 50 different people who have, echoed this answer throughout all of history.
Right. And what I thought one of the most interesting things from that article was a reference to the fact that there's the people that are your age or 20s didn't live through the major periods of time that there were scandals about the child molestations in the church. And not many of them went to Catholic school and got, their knuckles slapped by a nun because there are no nuns teaching anymore. And so you all the people that had those experiences were my age or older, in the 50s or older. And you talk to anybody who's in their 50s or older that went to a Catholic school, they got some complaints, some bitches about it. But people in their 20s are like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah. And so it oddly enough, it's freed up being able to convert people because they don't have all these hangups. Yeah. They don't have any exposure. Mm-hmm. And so you're able to just kind of talk about the Catholic teaching without all the sins of the different people that have been involved in the church before. So it's provided an odd opportunity that I wouldn't think. The fact that there are less kids in Catholic schools actually provided it for an opportunity to convert some people.
There are also an overwhelming number of Tolkien fans of those who are Catholic. So I don't want to discredit Tolkien here too by not mentioning him, because I think his writings and stuff like that have led a lot of people indirectly to the Catholic Church in a lot of ways. We have to get a reference to him here in the last episode of the season, but hopefully he'll be canonized someday. I think he will be. I've hoped that he will be.
There's a lot of truth to that. Tolkien, the gateway to the Catholic Church. Yeah. People, this guy's interesting. Interesting about his life. And then, like they read C.S. Lewis too, like as far as Christian thought and that type of thing. So it's fascinating to see how that resonates with so many people. Anyway, so I have a couple final thoughts on this particular chapter. I like that he says on 208, he says Napoleon, this is his modern day Napoleon, not the original Napoleon, but Napoleon will not succeed in his Mexican policy, and Mexico will add some 15 to 20 new states to the American Union as soon as it's clearly for the interest of all parties that it should be done and can't be done by mutual consent without war or violence. And that never happened yet, but I like his optimism. But, I mean, back then they weren't seen as like such a different kind. They weren't as established as a country either,
Yeah.
because they had revolutions and they had.
Yeah. Well, I think at the time what he's referring to is that Mexico was under French control, like by proxy, like France owned the rights to Mexico, essentially.
Correct. That's right. That's right. But I like his closing statement. He talks about but the American, there's a quote, but the American people need not trouble themselves about their exterior expansion. That will come of itself as fast as desirable. Let them devote their attention to their internal destiny, to the realization of their mission within, and they will gradually see the whole continent coming under their system, forming one grand nation, a really Catholic nation, great, glorious, and free. That's a pretty awesome,
great way to end
thoughts. And I thought a good, if he's right about that, fantastic. I think in some sense, the country's kind of lost its way, as we, everybody always says that, but I think it can come back. I get optimistic sometimes, I get pessimistic other times, and right now I'm still in this kind of cautiously optimistic theme. No matter how the election's going to turn out, I really do feel like there's a change in our society, and I think people are yearning for some truth and some foundation, some stability, and not just trying to reach for anything to get that. I think people realize there's just too much chaos and there's a lack of truth.
Yeah,
and it's refreshing to see like RFK Jr. talk about truth. Elon Musk is really hammering the truth angle, as far as like journalism and free speech, and the truth will will itself out. And I think he's been a really inspirational figure. I was not a big fan of Elon Musk years ago, but his success in just dreaming big and then working hard to get there and then achieving almost miraculous results has been a shot in the arm for our country, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's causing all these other CEOs and all these other business leaders and these tech leaders and these engineers all across our country. Hey, why aren't we doing huge stuff? Why aren't we why aren't we doing what Elon does and break through all this? And part of it's just the will to do it.
Yeah.
And I think Orestes Brownson describes in America where there was that will back then. And there was an expectation we're going to annex a bunch of Mexico into new states, and that'd be great, know, and it'll be great for everybody. They'll want it, we'll want it, and we'll get done.
Yeah.
So it's I think it's inspirational. I don't know if we're a divinely guided country, but like he espouses, that providential spirit. I hope that we are, but I don't. He asserts. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think he's right about just about everything he talks about in this book. I think this has been one of the most influential books that we've read on the podcast, and maybe one that I've read, period. This is definitely up there with the Tolkien Dogmatics book for one of my favorites that we've read here. I just think he just gives great explanations for, why contract theory doesn't work, the social compact theory just doesn't work. I think this last chapter especially is a great explanation of how necessary religion is and how sort of aligned with Catholicism, if not explicitly intertwined with Catholicism, the United States is and can be in the future. And just kind of connecting that to my own experiences with these political things and with the young Catholic people out there. I think I am a little optimistic right now. Maybe not as optimistic as I'd like to be about the election in 2 days, and maybe in 3 days or 5 months, whenever they finally finish counting the votes, I'll be less optimistic. No, I think he's right, and I think there is still hope for this country, and it is a great country.
Good thoughts.
What do you think? Do you have any final wrapping up thoughts on the book as a whole?
I mean, I would say I guess I'm a little too cynical.
Really? You are not one to be cynical.
To follow his thought completely about how consistent the United States is with Catholic ideals. And I think The nation has split off, or is like we've gone on a kind of like a gradually separating path from true Christian morality. But I feel like we're kind of at the apex or nadir? The furthest distance between those two. I'm hoping that we're turning towards a more consistently Christian. I don't mean that like to be like, an official religion or anything like that. I'm just talking about principles and political ideals.
Yeah.
And the big thing for me is the belief in that there is the truth, and I think, as they say, the truth will set you free. I think that the truth is seeking the truth and following that wherever it leads you.
Yeah.
Works in government, and it works with religion, and it works in your family and all that. I mean, everything. Truth is so important, and I feel like we might be finally turning a corner. And what I'm really optimistic about is long form podcasts being now seen. Now, if Trump wins, every major political candidate will have to do 2 or 3 hour long form podcast interviews.
Yeah.
It used to have to be, you have to sit down on Face the Nation. No, you don't. And the Republicans should stop doing it. And I agree, like J.D. Vance is talking about, and Elon Musk and some others are talking about, we just need to auction off the bandwidth. There's no reason for CBS, NBC, and ABC to still have that for free.
Yeah.
They should be. They have revenue, ad revenue. They can buy it. They can get on cable TV just like every other stupid channel out there. They shouldn't be subsidized by us, and NPR and PBS should be private enterprises. But I think, I think they're irrelevant. The baby boomers are the only ones that pay attention to them. So I think long form interviews, even if you lie for 3 hours, people will still get a sense of who you are, where you came from. And with a good interviewer, just asking, hey, where'd you come from? How'd you grow up? What are important things in your life? What do you aspire to? And what's your greatest disappointment? And you ask those questions of anybody, and you're going to know whether you can trust them or not. And when you're sitting across from somebody with unlimited time, you're going to just say, what do you think about the death penalty? That's a hard issue. What do you think about abortion? Just tell me. I mean, everything about it. Anything and everything, and keep talking. And then you just stare at them and you let them answer. And eventually they're going to tell you what they believe. Yeah. Either by saying it or by not saying it. These long form things, I think, are going to be, they're like the benefit of the Lincoln Douglas debates, where that they would intelligently respond to each other on important issues, and not just avoid it, name call, and all that kind of stuff. With our presidential debates, they can get sound bites, and people be like, I don't know what he thinks. He seems like a creep or whatever. The long form podcasts are going to revolutionize our republic. Yeah. Nothing but the good for that.
So to Donald Trump, who's listening right now, you need to come on our podcast and be our guest within the next 2 days, and it'll really change what's going to happen in the election on Tuesday.
Well, it's not out of the world of possibility that you would be a podcast host in 20 years interviewing a presidential candidate worth millions of followers listening. I mean, it's true. There's no reason why that couldn't happen. Yeah. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but, why wouldn't it?
Yeah, true. It's fair enough.
And if not you, who would? I mean, think about who would be a better interviewer to have somebody discuss these issues than somebody with your character and intellect and eventually your experience. Going through that stuff and being fair about it.
Maybe. We'll see, I guess.
I mean, it's not going to happen in the next 2 days. Yeah. In 16 years.
That's true. That's true.
Because then you're mid-30s.
Yeah. That's true.
Younger. I mean, Rogan's my age.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Overnight for him.
Yeah.
He was just doing a podcast in his living room in the early 2000s, 2008, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's a very optimistic thought to end this season on. Do you have any books picked out for next season? We'll be off next week, but then starting season 10, I guess, the week after.
the short answer is no.
Figured. But we'll have to figure that out because then the week after that, we won't be able to record because I'll be in France.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we off for 2 weeks, or are we doing
Off for 1 week and then do one episode and then a week off. And then maybe we'll have time for an episode when I come back, but maybe not. We'll see.
Right. Unless we do it like midweek or something.
Yeah, we'll see.
We need to get back and all that stuff.
Yeah, and homework and everything like that. Yeah.
But no, I'm willing to entertain any suggestions. But I'm working. I was thinking about it.
Yes.
I mean, that's about the extent of the work. I thought about it. Yes.
Well, you can, of course, send us suggestions for books on our Twitter, or our X, I guess I should really be calling it, at ULMTD Opinions. But no, this is a great season. I really enjoyed this book. Definitely one of my favorites that we've read for this. But I have been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop. And that's, you hear the footsteps? That's still Violet pacing outside.
Oh, I did not hear that. Oh, good for her.